I mean, you can't genuinely look at that final shot and tell me it isn't an absolute triumph. I mean, you've got this poor, downtrodden man who has spent, the entire narrative fighting a completely hostile world.
Wait, hold on a second. A triumph?
Yes, a triumph. Battling the sheer caprices of fate in the freezing cold, and against all odds, he actually wins.
Are you joking? A triumph? Mate, it's completely contradictory. I mean, structurally, it's just dodgy in places, and philosophically, it's a mess.
Oh, that is absolute rubbish.
It isn't. You're giving Charles Chaplin way too much credit for what was essentially a massive commercial compromise just to put smiles on faces.
That is ridiculous, mate, and you know it. Look, you listening right now, you pull up a chair, grab a drink, and welcome to the table. We're right in the thick of it today.
We really are.
No polite throat clearing, no academic posturing. I have just slammed this massive dog-eared text on the table between us.
Heavy text, yeah.
Right.
Cinema, the magic vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
And we are tearing straight into the film Charles Chaplin desperately wanted to be remembered by. His 1925 masterpiece, The Gold Rush.
Masterpiece is a strong word.
I'm using it. And I only use a qualifier because my very cynical friend across from me seems to think it's a calculated, emotionally manipulative fraud.
I didn't say fraud. I said flawed. Highly flawed.
Oh, semantics.
No, it's important. We are talking about a film that sets itself up as a gritty reflection of the great gold rush of 1898, right?
Yeah.
And then it just entirely abandons its own internal logic whenever Chaplin needs a cheap laugh or a tear. You're swept up in the mythology of the man rather than looking at what's actually on the screen.
I am looking at what's on the screen.
Yeah.
What fascinates me is how he takes a genuinely horrific historical event. I mean, people literally starving and freezing in the wilderness.
Which they did.
Exactly. And he manages to extract this elemental joy from it without losing the stakes. Let's just look at the setup, all right?
Yeah.
1898, the Klondike. You've got the lone prospector, Chaplin's iconic tramp character, and he is just one of thousands of desperate souls trekking up the Chilkoot Pass into northern Canada.
Yes, the Chilkoot Pass. Let's actually talk about the historical reality of that for a second, because the source text brings up this setting.
Go on.
The real stampede of 1898 involved nearly 100,000 people trying to get to Dawson City.
It was massive.
It was brutal. The Canadian authorities required every prospector to bring a literal ton of goods with him. A literal ton. Enough food to survive a year just to cross the border. It was a grueling, deadly marathon of human endurance.
Exactly. And that's the bloody genius of it. You take that brutal historical reality and then you drop the tramp into it.
But he doesn't fit.
That's the point. He's totally unprepared. He's out there in a blizzard with his little bowler hat, his baggy trousers, and his bamboo cane, just slipping around on the ice.
Right, looking ridiculous.
He's weak, he's insignificant, and he's thrown into the ultimate survival situation. It is a brilliant, universal, tragic comedy right from the jump. The visual contrast alone tells you everything you need to know about his chances.
But the survival situation isn't earned, mate.
How is it not earned?
Because how does he actually survive the elements in the first act? By staggering into an isolated cabin to escape a bear. It's cheap melodrama from the very first reel.
Oh, come on.
It is. He gets into this cabin and miraculously bumps into two massive narrative conveniences.
They aren't conveniences, they're characters.
You have Big Jim McKay, who just happens to have found a massive gold claim but lost his way in a storm.
Right.
And Black Larson, who just happens to be a wanted murderer. It's entirely contrived.
Wait, contrived? How is that contrived? It's a pressure cooker.
It's convenient.
It's absolute narrative efficiency. You've got three desperate men trapped together in the freezing cold by a blizzard. That cabin isn't just a set. It operates as a microcosm for society.
I'm a microcosm now.
Yes. You've got the innocent but weak prospector. You've got the wealthy man who has been stripped of his wealth by nature in Big Jim. And you've got the completely lawless, amoral villain in Black Larson.
It's a theatrical setup, not a cinematic one.
But it works brilliantly. And the bear that chases him into the cabin.
Yes, let's talk about the bear.
I was thinking about this when reading the text. That bear isn't just a physical threat. It is a brilliant manifestation of the caprices of fate.
A manifestation of fate. Are you listening to yourself?
Hear me out. It's just nature, right? Completely indifferent, constantly hunting the poor and the unprepared. It forces these three disparate social classes into one room and says, Right. Deal with each other.
Wait, it's a guy in a bear suit meant to make children giggle.
You can't be serious.
No, seriously, look at the mechanics of the storytelling. The morality of this so-called microcosm is completely dodgy.
Dodgy how?
Let's look at what actually happens to the villain. Black Larson steals Big Jim's claim. He commits the ultimate sin of the gold rush.
Right. He's the bad guy.
And then how does Chaplin deal with him? How does this brilliant writer-director resolve the moral conflict of the first act?
Nature takes its course.
Larson is trying to escape, and he dies in an avalanche. Poof! Gone. Nature just conveniently wipes out the bad guy.
It's incredibly dramatic.
Is that poetic justice, or is that just a lazy screenwriting trope? A literal deus ex machina, because Chaplin didn't know how to write a proper character-driven resolution to a murder plot.
Hold on, I think you're fundamentally misreading the tone. You're asking for a modern, gritty thriller resolution where the hero confronts the villain in a fistfight or something.
No, I'm asking for narrative payoff.
But I'm looking at this and thinking, the avalanche is the entire point. The northern setting is the real antagonist. It's about how utterly insignificant human morality is in the face of absolute indifferent nature.
So nature is a moral arbiter now. It just knows to crush the bad guy.
No, the exact opposite. The avalanche doesn't care that Larson is a murderer. It doesn't care about the gold claim. It just falls because of gravity and snowpack.
Very convenient gravity.
It's brilliant because it shows that the hostile world doesn't play by human rules. Our hero, the lone prospector, survives precisely because he doesn't try to dominate the landscape like Larson, and he doesn't try to conquer it for wealth like Big Jim.
Right.
He just tries to endure his passivity as his survival mechanism.
He endures because the script demands it, not because of any intellectual rigor. The source text literally points this out, mate.
Points what out?
That the hero is sometimes morally doubtful and completely anti-intellectual. The film resonates with the audience because it bypasses logic and goes straight for the emotional jugular.
Well, cinema is emotion.
But the avalanche is a structural shortcut. It's a cheap trick to clear the board so Chaplin can move on to the next set piece without having to deal with the narrative weight of a murderer.
Well, I wouldn't call a massive practical effects sequence a cheap trick. Making people feel the overwhelming scale of the environment is cinematic.
But the environment wasn't even real for most of the film.
What do you mean?
You're talking about this grand, sweeping Alaskan landscape, but the production itself was an absolute shambles.
I mean, it had issues, sure.
You were talking about Chaplin's vision, as if this was all perfectly planned from day one. It wasn't. It was chaos. The whole thing was derailed by his own hubris and messy personal life.
I know it had a difficult birth, yes, but that...
Difficult birth is the understatement of the century.
Yeah.
Let's break down what actually happened. Chaplin began shooting this on location in Alaska and the Sierra Nevadas.
Wait, for authenticity.
He wanted a realistic tone. He wanted to follow up the gritty realism of his previous film, A Woman of Paris, which was a serious drama.
Yeah, a total departure for him.
So he took a massive crew out into the freezing cold. He cast Lita Gray as Georgia, the female lead. And what happened?
Well,
after several months of shooting in brutal conditions, the results were completely unsatisfactory. The shoot was entirely derailed.
Okay, yes, the Lita Gray situation was a bit of a sticky situation.
Sticky? Mate, it was a scandal that forced him to shut down a multi-million-dollar production.
It got out of hand.
He married his lead actress, Lita Gray, who was essentially a teenager at the time. She got pregnant. And on top of all that, it turned out she completely lacked the acting talent required to carry a massive feature film.
All right, I admit, as a producer, you'd be pulling your hair out. But how does a production even survive that?
By throwing money at the problem and retreating? What does the supposed genius do?
He pivots.
He scraps the location shoot. He scraps his realistic vision. He abandons the documentary feel he was going for and retreats to the safety and total control of the Hollywood studio.
Which was a smart move.
He completely changes the tone of the film to this fairy tale, semi-surrealist, dreamlike atmosphere. He recast the lead with Georgia Hale. That shift in tone wasn't an artistic choice born of pure inspiration.
Why couldn't it be both?
Because it was a desperate salvage job. His chaotic personal life ruined the actual physical production in the snow.
That's a highly cynical way to look at the creative process. Look, hear me out. Yes, the Lita Gray situation was a complete shambles. Yes, the production started as a disaster.
a very expensive disaster.
But what does it mean for a piece of art to be born from disaster? Because honestly, sometimes that friction, that sheer panic, is exactly what forces a creator to find the diamond in the rough.
Or it forces them to panic and compromise.
No, think about the mechanics of moving from an Alaskan glacier into a soundstage. When you are on a glacier, you are at the mercy of the light, the wind, the freezing actors.
Which is what realism is.
But moving to the studio, adopting that fairy tale, dreamlike, semi-surrealist tone, the studio allowed him to use salt and flour for snow. It allowed him to perfectly control the lighting, to isolate the tramp's expression.
So it made it fake.
That shift is exactly what elevated the gold rush from what would have been a dry, realistic documentary into an unrepeatable masterpiece. The artificiality of the studio actually enhanced the mythic quality of the tramp.
Enhanced it. Mate, he chopped it to pieces.
What do you mean?
He didn't just change locations, he butchered the narrative. Let's look at the actual numbers provided in the text. The original runtime, the footage they actually shot, edited, and intended to use for the initial cut, was 3,129 meters of film.
Okay.
Do you know what the final release cut was?
2,592 meters.
Exactly. 2,592 meters. Do you understand the sheer volume of material that is?
It's a lot, but...
He slashed over 500 meters of film. We are talking about roughly 20% of the entire movie.
Which is just tight editing.
That is a massive chunk of narrative, connective tissue, character development, and establishing shots just thrown on the cutting room floor. And here's the critical part. Chaplin acted as his own editor on this.
With help.
He worked alongside his art director, Charles D. Hall, and his photographers, Roland Tutherow and Jack Wilson.
And they are absolute legends in their own right.
Yes, but when you act as your own editor in the middle of a panicked, salvaged production, you lose all objectivity.
Not necessarily.
There was no studio executive to tell him no. There was no independent editor to say, look, Charles, we need this scene for the story to make sense. We are not watching a cohesive vision. We are watching the panicked remnants of a failed Alaskan shoot forcefully stitched together with studio fairy dust to hide the cracks.
Okay, break that down for me, though. How does chopping a sixth of your film automatically make it a panic failure? Why couldn't it be disciplined?
Because you don't shoot 3,000 meters if you only need 2,000.
I look at a 500-meter cut and I don't see compromise. I see a masterclass in pacing.
Because when you cut that much material late in the game, you inevitably create structural gaps. You end up relying on emotion rather than logic to bridge the scenes.
But Chaplin's cinema isn't about rigid novelistic logic. It's about rhythm.
Oh, rhythm, right.
Yes. He, Hall, Tutherow, and Wilson, they got into that editing room, they looked at the massive, sprawling mess of the location footage, and they carved away everything that wasn't strictly necessary for the joke or the emotional beat. They distilled it.
They gutted it.
No, I think they realized in that editing suite that the grim, literal reality of A Woman of Paris was never going to work for the tramp character in the snow. The tramp is a mythical figure. He needs a mythical landscape. The dreamlike tone isn't a retreat, it's an ascension.
An ascension to what? To pure sentimentality.
To emotional truth.
Because that's all the studio pivot really achieved. It allowed him to abandon the harsh reality of the Klondike and turn a story about freezing, starving prospectors into a weepy, predictable melodrama.
It is not a melodrama.
Just look at how the tone shifts in the next major section of the film. We move away from the wilderness, away from the survival stakes, and we go into the town. We enter the Monte Carlo dance hall.
Oh, dance hall. This is where the heart of the film really starts beating. The social dynamics here are incredible.
If by heart you mean artificially engineered emotional extortion, then sure.
Oh, you're so cynical.
Let's look at the mechanics of this sequence. The lone prospector wanders into this bustling dance hall looking pathetic, and he falls head over heels in love with Georgia, the beautiful dancer, now played by Georgia Hale.
Right.
And what does she do? Does she see his inner worth? No. She completely uses him. She only agrees to dance with the poor, ragged tramp to make her local Don Juan boyfriend, Jack Cameron, jealous.
Yes. And that's brilliant social commentary.
Commentary on what? That people are mean.
You have to think about the audience in 1925. We are talking about working class people, many of whom have felt the crush of poverty or social invisibility. Chaplin is setting up a dynamic that they instantly recognize.
He's pandering.
He's not pandering. The source text quotes this amazing Spanish proverb that I think perfectly encapsulates Chaplin's entire philosophy here. Listen to this.
I'm bracing myself.
The rich laugh carefully because they have much to lose. The poor need laughter to forget that they have nothing to laugh about.
You can't be serious with that quote right now. It's incredibly reductive.
I am completely serious. It is the underlying thesis of his comedy. Chaplin understood this principle in his bones. Why does he make jokes at the expense of the rich?
Because it's easy.
No, because he highlights the cruelty of the handsome, wealthy Jack Cameron and the shallow vanity of Georgia. Because it instantly resonates. The audience knows what it's like to be ignored. They know what it's like to be used by people who have more power or beauty than they do.
Right, so he exploits that feeling.
The humor comes from the tramp trying to maintain his dignity, adjusting his tie, tipping his hat, while the wealthy completely dismiss his humanity.
But he doesn't just show the tramp trying to maintain dignity. He dials up the character's pathetic nature to an absolutely absurd degree.
He's a clown. That's what he does.
It crosses the line from empathy into manipulation. Let's look at the New Year's Eve dinner sequence. This is the prime example.
It's a beautiful scene.
The prospector invites Georgia and her friend Betty to his little cabin for a special New Year's Eve dinner. He spends all his time and meager resources preparing this elaborate evening. He sets the table. He waits. He hopes. And he is stood up. They completely forget about him. They never arrive.
It is absolutely heartbreaking. The image of him listening to the distant cheers of the town while sitting alone in the dark.
He is artificially dialed up to wring tears from you. Why does Chaplin make his hero so pathetic?
Because life is pathetic sometimes.
Let's analyze the mechanics of the setup. He builds an expectation of joy, he isolates the character visually, and then he slowly crushes the hope. He isn't treating the tramp like a real person in that scene. He is using him as a vessel for audience pity.
That's incredibly harsh.
Georgia is incredibly cruel for leading him on, but we, the audience, are expected to just forgive her later on because the plot demands a romantic resolution. The sadness isn't earned through complex character development. It's forced onto the audience because Chaplin knows you'll fall for the sad puppy dog eyes of a poor man fighting a hostile world. It's emotional blackmail.
Look, maybe I am a sucker for the sad puppy dog eyes, but hold on. You're looking at this with such a cold, modern, cynical eye. You're dissecting it like a clinical psychologist.
I'm dissecting the script.
You have to put yourself in the shoes of the audience back then? The sadness in that New Year's Eve scene isn't blackmail. It's the necessary emotional bedrock for the entire film.
Bedrock for what?
For the catharsis. If you don't feel the absolute crushing weight of his isolation when Georgia fails to show up, then any victory he has later won't feel earned. Comedy and tragedy are two sides of the same coin.
Cliché, but okay.
He has to take you to the absolute lowest point of human loneliness so that the laughter feels like a relief. And I am directly challenging you right now. I want you to admit it.
Heavyweight what?
Tell me you didn't feel a shred of genuine sympathy when he was sitting there alone at that table on New Year's Eve. Tell me the mechanics of that scene didn't work on you.
Look, I'm not made of stone. Of course, it works on a primal, instinctual level.
Oh.
If you show a dog getting kicked, the audience feels sad.
Wow, okay.
But that doesn't make it great art. A cheap jump scare in a horror film works on a primal level. It makes your heart rate spike, it makes you physically jump in your seat, but it doesn't make the film a masterpiece of psychological tension.
A jump scare is completely different.
Chaplin is playing the audience. It's highly effective, yes, but intellectually, it's quite vacant. He's pushing the sad button because he needs you to like the tramp.
Intellectually vacant. Are you mental? The richness of invention in the gold rush is unparalleled.
Oh, here we go.
Let's talk about the technical wizardry. Let's talk about the scenes that have literally been bequeathed to cinema history. You say he's pushing buttons, you say he's playing the audience. Well, he's a bloody maestro, mate.
The fanboy comes out.
No, seriously, let's step away from the plot for a second and look at the visual invention. Look at the dream sequence on New Year's Eve, the dance of the buns.
Classic bit, yes.
He stabs 2 bread rolls with forks and manipulates them like little feet, doing this intricate, flawless vaudeville dance on the table. The sheer dexterity of that scene.
It's a good physical comedy.
Or let's go back to the starvation in the cabin. The feast of the starving gold diggers. They literally boil and eat the tramp's boot. And the way he treats it, he delicately twirls the shoelaces around his fork like spaghetti. He sucks the nails as if they were marrow bones from a pheasant.
It's a good prop gag, yes.
It's more than a prop gag. The struggle with the bear, the fight against the gale wind, the dramatic physics of the cabin dangling over the precipice at the end of the film.
The cabin scene is technically impressive, I'll give you that.
Where they have to balance their weight to stop it from falling into the abyss. The richness of invention in this one film alone would be enough to serve 5 modern comedies. It's a magic vehicle all on its own.
Okay, let me stop you right there.
Right.
You're fundamentally confusing physical pantomime with cinematic progression.
How is that confusing them?
Yes, eating the boot is a clever gag. Yes, he used licorice for the shoelaces and hard candy for the nails so he could actually eat them.
Exactly. Brilliant dedication.
It's dedicated physical acting. But let's bring in some actual cinematic theory here from the source text, because this highlights the core issue with Chaplin's style. Have you ever read up on Dziga Vertov?
The Soviet documentary guy, right?
Exactly. Dziga Vertov, 1896 to 1954. A pioneer director and one of the most important cinema theoreticians of the era.
I know of him, yeah.
Vertov proposed what he called the cinema eye theory, kino glass. Now, Vertov argued that the camera shouldn't just record a stage play.
Right.
He argued for breaking filmed reality down into many tiny shots, photographed from completely different angles, different elevations, and different distances. He would physically cut the celluloid into fragments and splice them back together in rapid succession.
Like a montage.
Exactly. The goal was to greatly increase the emotional temperature and the kinetic energy of the scene through editing and camera placement. You see this perfectly realized in his 1929 film, Man with a Movie Camera.
Right, okay. I know Man with a Movie Camera. It's brilliant, it's frantic, it's all double exposures and rapid cuts. But what does Soviet montage theory have to do with Charles Chaplin boiling a shoe in a cabin?
Everything. Because comparing the two highlights exactly why Chaplin's filmmaking is actually quite lazy and theatrical.
Oh, come on, lazy.
Think about it. Vertov is using the camera as an active participant. He is using the mechanics of cinema, the edit, the frame rate, the juxtaposition of images as a revolutionary tool to shape reality and emotion in the viewer's brain.
Sure.
Now look at Chaplin's framing in The Gold Rush. It is completely static.
Well, yes, it's mostly wide shots.
It's entirely theatrical. He essentially locks down the heavy camera on a tripod, lights the set flatly, and then he and the other actors put on a stage play in front of it.
Because he wants you to see the performance.
By 1925, the grammar of cinema was evolving rapidly. Directors were moving the camera, cutting for emotion, using close-ups to show psychological states. But Chaplin is still directing like he's putting on a show at a vaudeville music hall. The framing is completely archaic compared to the revolutionary editing of someone like Vertov.
Hold on, wait a second. That is a completely unfair comparison. You are essentially comparing a DJ to an acoustic guitar.
I'm comparing two filmmakers working in the same decade. It's a perfectly valid critique of his directorial style.
No, it isn't. Let's think about the mechanics of what Vertov is doing versus what Chaplin is doing. Vertov is like a DJ aggressively remixing a track, chopping up the beat, throwing in samples, forcing you to feel the rhythm through aggressive manipulation.
Right, which is cinematic.
It's cool, but it's entirely constructed in the edit. Chaplin is setting up a single microphone in a perfectly tuned acoustic hall and letting you hear the natural reverberation of his performance.
So he's a performer, not a director.
Chaplin doesn't need rapid-fire cuts or 50 different camera angles because the emotional temperature of his scenes is entirely located in the physical performance itself.
But that makes him a performer, not a masterful film director.
It makes him both. If you take the dance of the buns or him delicately twirling that shoelace like spaghetti, think about how that works on the viewer's eye.
I am thinking about it.
If you cut away from him to show an extreme close-up of the nail, and then cut to a wide shot of the room, and then cut to a reaction shot of Big Jim McKay looking confused, you completely ruin the rhythm of the comedy.
You don't ruin it, you construct it cinematically.
No, the comedy exists in the sustained, unbroken illusion. You need that wide, theatrical, static shot so the audience can see the entire gag unfold in real time. It requires the viewer's eye to do the editing, scanning from his face down to his plate and back again.
I don't buy that.
It's not lazy framing. It's a supreme confidence in his own physical abilities to hold your attention without cinematic trickery.
Confidence.
Yeah.
Or is it simply a stubborn refusal to adapt to the medium?
He practically invented the medium.
He was fundamentally a stage performer who happened to have a camera pointed at him. He didn't trust the edit because he was a control freak who wanted the audience watching his entire body at all times.
He was the biggest star in the world because he understood exactly what the medium required to transmit his specific art. And his art was projecting humanity, not mechanical theory.
Projecting sentimentality, you mean?
Which actually brings us perfectly to the ending, the climax of the film. And I know you are going to absolutely lose your mind over this, but I think it is the perfect capstone to the story.
Oh, I'm already bracing myself. The ending of The Gold Rush is, without a doubt, one of the most egregious moral cop-outs in the history of commercial cinema.
It is a beautiful, optimistic triumph. Let's lay out the narrative for everyone listening so we are all on the same page.
Please do.
Towards the end, Big Jim McKay recovers his memory. He finds the tramp and agrees to give the prospector half of his massive gold fortune if he just helps him find the location of the lost claim. They head back out into the snow, they survive the cabin dangling over the cliff edge, which is a phenomenal sequence, and they find the gold. They become instant millionaires. And the final sequence shows them returning home in absolute triumph, dressed in fine clothes, on a luxurious ocean liner.
Right. A complete fantasy.
And who happens to be a passenger on that exact same boat? Georgia. She's traveling in steerage. She's disappointed. She's going home. Presumably her life and her romance with Jack Cameron hasn't worked out the way she wanted.
Yeah.
But through a mix-up where the tramp falls into steerage while posing for a photograph, she finds him. She learns that the lone prospector is no longer a starving tramp, but a multimillionaire. He takes her in his arms, the photographers crowd around, and he introduces her to the waiting press as his fiancée. It is glorious.
I'm actually feeling a bit sick just hearing you recount it. It is massive, hypocritical nonsense.
How is it hypocritical? How can you be mad at a happy ending?
Mate, think about the mechanics of the story we just watched for the previous hour and a half. The entire film spends its time reflecting on the terrible, destructive influence of gold and greed.
Well, yes, in the wilderness.
We literally see Black Larson, a man driven mad by greed, murder people and they get crushed in an avalanche as punishment. We see the gold diggers, including our hero, starving to death, freezing, hallucinating, reduced to eating their own leather footwear in a desperate, pathetic state.
Because the environment is harsh?
No, because the film establishes the pursuit of gold as a corrupting, deadly force that turns men into animals.
Okay, yes, it does show that.
And then at the absolute last minute, Chaplin turns around and says, actually, never mind, and gives the hero the massive pile of gold, Andy the girl.
Because he earned it.
It completely undermines the entire thematic structure of the film. It's a massive, reassuring commercial cop-out. He wanted to make sure the audiences left the theaters smiling and buying tickets to his next picture, so he completely abandoned the moral lesson he spent 2,000 meters of film trying to painstakingly build.
You are entirely missing the point of the fairy tale structure. You're looking for a gritty, socioeconomic critique of capitalism, but that's not what he's doing.
Then what is he doing?
The source text actually frames this beautifully. It asks a rhetorical question about Chaplin's choice. Could he refuse consummation to one who had humbly lived in hope, though tossed on the waves of fortune?
Oh, please stop quoting that book like it's a sacred religious text. Refuse consummation. It's a justification for a weak script.
It's not weak, it's true. The film is the incarnation of an optimistic faith in life. It magically incorporates dreams of adventure and reward.
It's pandering.
Look at the mechanics of who gets punished and who gets rewarded. Yes, gold is absolutely destructive to the greedy and the violent like Black Larson. But what about the pure of heart? What about the humble prospector who never actually cared about the gold?
So he just stumbles into a fortune?
He just wanted love. He just wanted a warm meal and for Georgia to come to his dinner party. For him, the gold isn't a corrupting force. It's simply a reward from the universe for surviving the caprices of fate with his humanity intact. It's a fairy tale ending because Chaplin understands that people surviving the harsh realities of the 1920s need hope.
They don't need hope. They need thematic consistency. Do you know what this ending actually proves?
What?
It proves that audiences don't actually want gritty realism. They don't want to engage with moral complexity. They just want to see the downtrodden man magically win the lottery and get the beautiful girl who previously despised him.
And what's wrong with that?
It's pathetic wish fulfillment. It compromises the artistic integrity of the entire project to serve the box office.
Artistic integrity isn't just about making people miserable. It's about emotional truth. And the truth is, people survive tragedy and poverty by dreaming of the ocean liner and the girl. It's not wish fulfillment, it's a vital, necessary psychological comfort.
It's a lie.
You sit there with your cynicism, picking apart the production delays analyzing the meters of film cut, and demanding moral consistency like an auditor, and you completely miss the absolute magic of the vehicle itself.
And you sit there with your blind enthusiasm, entirely ignoring the fact that you're being sold a perfectly packaged, contradictory lie.
It's not a lie, it's cinema.
The historical grit of the 1898 Klondike Stampede, a tragedy where thousands of real people died or were ruined, was sanitized, shot on a soundstage in California, and sold back to you as a cozy little love story.
It is an unrepeatable cinematic masterpiece. The physical comedy, the pathos, the bunkhouse dangling over the cliff edge while they scramble to shift their weight, that is pure cinema.
It is a wooden box on hinges in a studio in the Sierra Nevadas masking a failed Alaskan shoot. Look, to you listening to this right now, if you want to just swallow the lazy enthusiast view of cinema, if you just want to believe the fairy tale that the tramp conquers the mountain and gets the girl, then fine. Side with my mate here.
I highly recommend it.
But if you actually want to understand the mess, the hypocrisy, the frantic studio editing, and the real historical grit behind the images we consume, I dare you to actually read Cinema, The Magic Vehicle, Journey 1, look at the dates, look at the massive amount of footage he had to cut to hide his mistakes. Do the math yourself and see if it adds up to a masterpiece or just a really good salvage job.
Oh, whatever. You can analyze the math and the production memos all you want, but you cannot quantify joy. But I will leave you, the listener, with this one final thought to chew on. Think about this debate the next time you sit down in a dark theater to watch a massive modern blockbuster. Are we still a full century after the gold rush? Just desperate for the exact same unearned million-dollar happy endings because we fundamentally cannot handle the tragedy of the real world?
Oh, that's spot on. You've finally admitted it. It's just unearned escapism.
No, it isn't. You've missed the point entirely. I'm saying the escapism is the art.